look at you, shifting the entire frequency of your existence without even realizing it. Welcome back, you accidental architects of fate. You silent heroes who never wore capes. You beautiful fools who gave without expecting anything in return. You've arrived at a moment where your quiet kindness has triggered something in the shadows, something ancient, aware, and incapable of forgetting a debt. You fed a stray, didn't you? Maybe not literally, maybe not every time, but somewhere along the way, you reached into the void when nobody was watching. You helped someone when it cost you something. You stayed when everyone else walked away. You gave your last piece of bread to someone who had nothing to offer back. And you did it quietly. No post, no story, no audience, no applause. Just you in a fleeting moment, choosing to be something better than what the world taught you to be. What they never told you about real kindness, the kind that cost you, the kind that leaves you a little emptier and a little more exposed, is that it doesn't vanish into the void. It doesn't dissolve into the universe like some cosmic tax write-off. That energy, that choice, that tiny disruption in the fabric of reality travels. It moves through invisible networks, through connections you'll never fully comprehend, through systems that operate on frequencies most humans aren't built to perceive. And sometimes, just sometimes, that act of kindness lands in front of someone who was never supposed to see it. Someone searching for proof, for a sign, for a reminder that something in this world still exists outside of transaction, outside of manipulation, outside of the filthy machinery of self-interest. Someone out there. Someone who owns more than money or power. Someone whose influence bends reality. Whose access opens doors you've never even heard of. Someone with resources that could transform your life in ways you haven't yet dared to imagine is watching you. And they're not watching with suspicion or judgment. They're watching with something far more dangerous. Respect. You've become interesting to a person who doesn't get interested easily. You sparked something in someone who stopped believing people like you were even real. That stray you fed metaphorically wasn't just a random soul passing through your life. It was a test you never knew you were taking. An unannounced audition. A doorway disguised as a dead end. And you, in all your unintentional brilliance, passed it without effort because you weren't trying. That's the entire point. You weren't performing kindness for an audience or calculating the return on investment of your compassion. You acted from a place inside you that the world tried to bury but couldn't kill. Right now, in rooms you'll never enter, in conversations you'll never hear, your name is being spoken, not gossiped about, not dissected, but presented. You're being framed as an anomaly, as an asset, as someone worth observing. They're asking questions, not invasive or creepy ones, but strategic ones. Who is this person? What makes them move like that? What shaped them? What do they want? What could they become? What might happen if we handed them an opportunity they aren't expecting? Because at certain levels, people like that aren't impressed by resumes. They're not swayed by polished performances, and they're certainly not fooled by pretend goodness. They're not searching for flash, polish, or perfectly rehearsed personas. They're hunting for something so rare that most people go their entire lives without ever witnessing it firsthand. Authenticity expressed through action, character revealed under pressure, and genuine goodness offered without an audience to applaud it. And you, without planning, performing, or even thinking about it, displayed all three. You did it instinctively, unconsciously, naturally, without realizing that someone somewhere was quietly paying attention, taking note, and evaluating you in ways you never signed up for. You've convinced yourself that your acts of kindness disappear into the cracks of a chaotic universe. You think your sacrifices vanish into the background hum of everyone else's noise. The late nights you stayed behind to help a coworker who couldn't be bothered to say thank you, you assume they evaporated. The moment you covered a stranger's coffee without turning it into a performance or a posted moment, you figured it meant nothing. The times you chose kindness instead of revenge decency instead of ego, silence instead of chaos, grace instead of pettiness. You assume nobody cared. But energy, real energy, the kind that shifts unseen mechanisms, nudges fate, and changes probability, doesn't vanish. It doesn't fade. It travels. It leaves a mark. It becomes a signal. The people who operate at the highest levels, the ones who've been betrayed enough times to see through every mask, every manipulation, every performance, have developed an almost supernatural radar for that signal. They've spent years navigating circles where authenticity is nearly extinct. In their world, most people speak in angles, motives, strategies, and calculated gestures. Everyone wants something. Everyone is positioning themselves, rehearsing lines, wearing masks, and orchestrating interactions like transactions. But then there's you, the anomaly. You weren't angling for anything, you weren't networking, you weren't performing, you were simply doing the right thing at the worst possible cost. And you did it quietly. And that's what made you stand out more than any ambition or credential ever could. That's what slid your name into private conversations you'll never hear. That's what drew the attention of someone who rarely pays attention to anything anymore. When they felt your signature, the unmistakable vibration of real character, they noticed. And when they noticed, they didn't just shrug and move on. They stopped. They leaned in. They asked questions. So understand this clearly. This isn't a fairy tale where the universe hands you a trophy for being nice. Kindness isn't a lottery ticket. Karma isn't a vending machine. What's happening right now is far more nuanced, far more strategic, and far more consequential. This is recognition. The kind that matters. The kind that shifts the trajectory of lives. The kind that comes from people who can actually move pieces on silent boards, influence outcomes, change directions, and open doors that the average person doesn't even know are there. Now let's revisit that stray you fed. Because that moment wasn't random. Maybe it was literal. You helped someone homeless. You rescued an animal. You handed money to someone who couldn't give you anything back. Or maybe it was metaphorical. You mentored someone with nothing to offer. You defended a person everyone else had abandoned. You practiced loyalty when betrayal would have been easier. You told the truth when a lie would have advanced you. You protected someone who couldn't repay the favor. You chose integrity even when the world wouldn't have blamed you for choosing opportunity instead. Whatever shape that moment took, it created a ripple. Subtle, but powerful. And that ripple moved. It traveled through the hidden architecture of human connection, through emotional networks, through spiritual frequencies, through energetic channels most people never perceive. It moved through the spaces where intuition speaks louder than language, where patterns are recognized before words are exchanged, where the truth of a person isn't read but sensed. And in that unseen network, someone felt it. Someone who has spent decades reading those vibrations, navigating those currents, and decoding those signals. Someone who knows the difference between performance and truth. Someone who understands that the rarest people in the world are not the loudest. They're the quiet forces holding everything together when nobody acknowledges them. Someone who realizes that the ones worth investing in are the ones who do the right thing without expecting applause, permission, or reward. And that someone right now is looking in your direction. They felt your frequency the moment it rippled through the fabric of their world. It wasn't loud. It wasn't showy. It wasn't the kind of energy that announces itself or demands attention. It was subtle, quiet enough that most people would have missed it entirely, but refined, distinct, unmistakable to anyone with the experience, intuition, and authority to recognize it. They registered your signature like a trained musician recognizing a perfect pitch in a chaotic room, like an expert tracker noticing a rare footprint in a forest that's been empty for years. And now they're curious, genuinely curious. Not in the shallow, disconnected way the powerful often observe the powerless for amusement, but in a focused, intentional way that carries weight. This is the curiosity of a master craftsman who just witnessed someone use an old tool in a way no textbook ever documented. It's the curiosity of a decorated general watching a soldier demonstrate a type of courage they assumed humanity had lost generations ago. It's the curiosity of an architect discovering a material that shouldn't exist, stronger, more resilient, more promising than anything they've ever worked with. It's the curiosity of someone who has seen too much, learned too much, and been disappointed too often, suddenly stumbling upon proof that something rare is still alive in the world. And this is where your story quietly pivots, where your life begins to move toward a direction you could not have predicted, because the shift was never going to come from effort, hustle, or force. It was always going to come from who you are. When no one is watching, they're coming toward you. Not with danger, not with exploitation, not with the predatory intention that many people in positions of power develop once they realize someone has something they want. No, they're approaching you with something different, something almost reverent. They've recognized something in you that they can't find in most people. No matter how much money they pour into talent, no matter how many experts they hire, no matter how many resumes they sift through, what they saw in you is something that cannot be taught in an institution, engineered in a program, or purchased with influence. They saw character, the kind that reveals itself in small, inconvenient moments. They saw integrity, the kind that doesn't waver depending on who is watching. They saw your capacity to act without reward, without applause, without witnesses. They saw the way you treat another human being as a human being, not as a transaction, not as a strategy, not as a means to an end. Understand how rare that is. In the highest circles, where decisions affect thousands, where resources shift nations, where influence builds or destroys futures, authentic goodness is more valuable than genius, more valuable than skill, more valuable than ambition, because geniuses crack under pressure. Skilled people change when incentives shift. Ambitious people betray when the offer is high enough. But character, true character, remains constant. It doesn't take bribes. It doesn't bend to ego. It doesn't fracture under scrutiny. And these people, the ones now keeping their eyes on you, have learned through painful experience that character cannot be bought, no matter how deep their pockets go. So when they discover it, when they find someone like you out in the wild, someone displaying these qualities naturally, unpolished, unprompted, they move. Not with manipulation, not with subtle traps or empty promises. They move with opportunity, real opportunity. The type of opportunity that bends timelines, reshapes destinies, and unlocks paths that don't exist for most people. This is the kind of opportunity that doesn't come knocking twice. Not because it's rare in itself, but because finding someone worthy of it is rare. But before that wave of change arrives, and it will, you need to understand something crucial. This is not about being saved. This is not about a powerful figure descending from the clouds to rescue you from mediocrity or struggle. This is not about becoming someone's project or charity case. No one is coming to rewrite your story. They're coming because your story is already compelling. They're coming because you've built something inside yourself that most people never build, even with guidance, privilege, or resources. They're not coming to reshape you because the shape you take in the dark, when no one is watching, is already aligned with what matters to them. They're not coming to repair you. You're not broken. Despite how many times the world has tried to convince you otherwise, they're not coming to teach you values. You already embody the values they've spent years trying to instill in people who never understood them deeply enough to live them. You, yes, you have become the finished product, wandering through a world full of prototypes. A world full of people still trying to assemble basic morality, still trying to figure out loyalty, still trying to mimic empathy, still trying to imitate integrity without truly understanding it. Meanwhile, you've been quietly refining yourself in the background, unaware that you were becoming rare. You were testing your own limits, not to impress anyone, but because something in you refuses to take shortcuts. Your character was being shaped not by praise, but by pressure. Your integrity was being carved not in front of an audience, but in solitude. And now the people who actually matter, the ones who can shift the architecture of your life with a single decision, have noticed. They found the one thing they can't replicate. You. You are living, breathing proof that something inside the human spirit still functions the way it was originally meant to. In a world where people trade authenticity for convenience, empathy for advantage, kindness for optics, and morality for social currency, you are evidence that the original blueprint hasn't been entirely corrupted. You are a reminder that the human heart hasn't fully collapsed under the weight of greed, ego, and exhaustion. And that makes you valuable, far more valuable than you can currently comprehend. You think you're just moving through life, trying to do the right thing when you can. But from the perspective of the people who operate at the highest tiers of influence, from their vantage point, someone like you is a strategic rarity, a priceless resource, a human anomaly they thought had vanished. Now, let's talk about what happens when they finally reach out. The world has conditioned you to expect big moments to arrive with noise, dramatic announcements, fireworks, clear signs. But these people don't operate that way. The ones whose influence is so deep it quietly shifts realities rather than social media trends. They don't telegraph their moves. They don't arrive with fanfare, trumpets, or showmanship. They move like fault lines, quietly, steadily, with intentions so precise that most people don't even know a shift occurred until the landscape is permanently altered. Their first contact will be understated, almost deceptively ordinary. You might receive a message from an account you don't recognize. Nothing dramatic, just a small ripple that feels oddly significant. You might get invited to an event or meeting that seems slightly outside your usual world, something that feels random on the surface, but strangely aligned with your path. You might find yourself in conversation with someone you assume is a stranger, only to realize they know more about your character than they should, or that their questions aren't small talk, but probes designed to understand the architecture of your mind. You might be offered an opportunity that feels too precisely timed, too tailored, too clean to be coincidence. This is not luck. Do not trivialize it. Do not shrink it to coincidence or universal generosity. What's happening is calibration, alignment, recognition. Your frequency has finally synced with someone who's been scanning the horizon for exactly that signal. Not kind of, not close-ish. Exactly. Now let's break down what they're studying in those first interactions, those subtle tests that tell them whether stepping toward you is a wise move or a wasted one. They're not looking for your gratitude. They don't want you graveling or wide-eyed. They don't want theatrics, awe, or emotional collapse. They're not checking how loudly you can praise them or how quickly you can latch onto their attention. They want to see if you're the same person they originally detected, genuine, centered, unshaken by the weight of possibility. They want to see if you can receive without losing your identity, accept opportunity without becoming needy, engage with power without shrinking into servitude, sit at a table you were never invited to before without acting like you owe someone your soul. Because here's the truth about people who hold real power. Real power, not the performative kind that trends for a week and dissolves. People with real power are exhausted. Exhausted by flattery, exhausted by manipulation, exhausted by people who see them as access points or stepping stones. Exhausted by professionals who can simulate authenticity with such precision that even they forget their acting. They are surrounded by takers, opportunists, mimics, master performers, people who can cry on demand, apologize with perfect timing, show kindness only when it can be monetized, and be humble only when there's an audience watching. So, what do the truly powerful crave more than anything? Someone who doesn't want anything from them. Someone who doesn't shapeshift the moment they realize who they're talking to. Someone who doesn't get intoxicated by status or unravel under attention. Someone who remains steady, rooted, grounded, self-contained, no matter what is on the table. Someone who can sit in the presence of power and still remain themselves. If you can do that, if you can respond to new opportunities with the same calmness and sincerity you showed that stray you once helped, whether literal or symbolic, then everything around you begins to rearrange. Doors you didn't know existed start unlocking. People you never imagined would learn your name start asking where you've been hiding. Paths you didn't even believe were real beginning under your feet. Not because you begged for them, but because you proved yourself worthy long before anyone was watching. So let me tell you what's coming next if you handle this chapter correctly. Because the next phase isn't random. It's earned. It's precise. And it is about to reshape the architecture of your entire life. That moment of kindness you offered, the one you assumed dissolved quietly into the background of your day, didn't just create warmth or inspire a fleeting good feeling. It created information. It produced a signal. It broadcast a kind of data that isn't stored in databases or tracked by algorithms, but recorded in the subtle architectures of human consciousness. It revealed who you are beneath your rehearsed identity, under your defenses, beyond your roles. It exposed the end.